Following the death of King Erendur, his eldest son, Prince Amleth, claimed lordship over the Northern Kingdom, but his rule was limited merely to the region of Arthedain, while his brothers founded two rival kingdoms, those of Cardolan and Rhudaur. Before long, a devastating and protracted civil war broke out between the competing kingdoms, and it was not before an entire generation of Dunedain had known nothing but war that peace was seen once again between men. This tenuous and hard-won peace would last for many years, but still, the men of Arnor remained unable to set aside their petty differences. Reconciliation and reunification of the three squabbling kingdoms remains only as a distant dream. Ordered northward by Sauron, the Witch King seeks to establish a foothold as the first stepping stone on his path to conquering or destabilizing the kingdoms of the northern Dunedain. But the same discord that has kept Arnor from uniting in the face of a common threat has also kept Sauron's forces divided and scattered in the north. Goblins and mountain trolls have joined together, with the aim of subduing their neighbors, the snow trolls of the northern Misty Mountains. Needing the forces of both the goblins and the trolls to bolster his legions, the Witch King joins together with the snow trolls and their leader, Rogash, to bring both the goblins and the mountain trolls under the yoke of the Iron Crown.
Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Jordan, also known as J-Monster, and you're watching the official 3rd Age Reforged YouTube channel. Today I've got a scenario battle for you done by our own WK. It is a really cool matchup, and it is actually the first episode of a larger roleplay campaign that I will be covering on WK's behalf. But before we get into the battle itself, let's take a look at some of the army comps before we move on. Now, fittingly, the first army we're going to look at today is the forces of Angmar, being commanded by WK, the scenario creator. And he's got some Angmar Marauders here who make an excellent little tar pit unit, a lot of numbers, and a fair amount of damage behind them. However, their low defensive stats leave much to be desired. They're not terribly expensive though, and you can upgrade their attack and armor, so they do make a solid front line force. And behind them, we've got some Orc Fellers who are not great, but they do have higher than average attack values because of one of Angmar's faction traits, and that is that they do not suffer attack or melee defense penalties from higher unit sizes like all of the other factions do. So that makes them very, very strong infantrymen, but they do lack a lot of ranged and defensive capabilities to compensate for that. Over here we've got, I believe, 3 or 4 units, actually quite a lot of units of snow trolls, about 6 or so units of snow trolls. Not something you're going to see in your average game, but these are the forces of Rogash, who have joined with the Witch King of Angmar in order to topple their neighbors, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains and the Mountain Trolls. But don't feel too bad for them. They are by no means the oppressed. In fact, given the opportunity, they would turn around and subjugate their neighbors, and indeed they are in this scenario. But yeah, 6 units of snow trolls, got some more Orc Fellers back here, yet more Angmar Marauders. Then we got the man himself out here in front, the Witch Realm Inquisitors, which is where the Witch King is going to be hanging out today. These are fierce warriors from Angmar, absolutely no joke on the battlefield. In terms of Reforged balance, they are 2 HP Knight units, and Knights are, generally they combine the strengths of Lancers and melee cavalry, which if you guys want to see a little bit more about that, there are a lot of videos floating around. I recommend you check out UMA Commander. I actually have my own channel as well, and I did a big introduction to the patch and the new balance scheme. So if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about the mod and about classifications, I recommend you go and check that out. But for the purposes of just moving through this quickly, these guys are melee knights, which makes them very, very strong with 2 HP, expensive, low in number, but extremely powerful against other cavalry. So in a cav-to-cav fight, these guys are amazing. Second line here composed of Angmar Halberds, an AP unit with an anti-cavalry bonus. They are very, very nasty indeed, but they do lack a lot of defensive stats. Lacking a shield entirely is a really big drawback for a unit because they can be easily focused down by just about any missile unit in the game, and their lower melee defensive stats mean that if units can manage to get past the range of their polearms, they will cut these warriors down very, very quickly. More Orc Fillers, more Angmar Marauders, and that just about does it for WK's army. So let's take a look at what some of his allies have brought to the battle today. Over here we have the forces of Nokinsu, who's going to be commanding another force from the Witch Realm of Angmar, and he's got some Snaga Archers, some Witch Realm Blackguard, kind of a dismounted equivalent to the Witch Realm Inquisitors, but they do have a different model and a different general in the unit as well. Very, very strong 2 HP unit, decent amount of numbers. They also cause fear, and they inspire nearby units to greater feats of courage. Over here we have the Trolls of Gundabad, who are actually going to be getting a bit of an overhaul. If you guys are familiar with Reforged, or if you're not, it bears consideration that a lot of the Trolls have been overhauled using, I believe, models rather, from Lord of the Rings Conquest. So very familiar look to them, and it is also a much higher quality texture and a much nicer model made by our very own Crimson Battle. And don't worry, the Trolls of Gundabad are not being left behind. They will get that treatment eventually. Over here, got some more Angmar Halberds, some Snow Trolls, Angmar Marauders. You guys already know everything you need to know about them. And I think that this force is split up between 2 different areas. Indeed, it is. Got some more Angmar Marauders over here. And a bit of a deployment issue here. Got a lot of Snow Trolls and Angmar Marauders and Halberds. And actually some Guardians of Karn Dûm, who are a very interesting medium-tier infantry unit. They're kind of a higher medium-tier unit. They inspire units around them, so they are an essential building block to an Angmar army because they're going to keep the lower morale orcs from fleeing and running at the first sign of trouble. But yeah, a lot more trolls packed in there as well. Basically, the entire population, fighting population of the Snow Troll tribes has been mobilized for this particular showdown. And across the way, we have a third force being sent by Angmar, this one being commanded by DF, AK Gamer GR. He's got some Warg Riders, who are a very strong anti-cavalry unit, but they lack quite a lot in terms of their defensive capabilities. Now, they do have 2 HP, and most 2 HP cavalry tend to be knights. But the wargs have 2 HP, and that's just to make them kind of a glass cannon, so that they don't simply get shot to death very, very quickly. So it does take a little bit more to break these guys down. Strong anti-cavalry bonuses, but again, very much a glass cannon unit. Got a lot of Snow Trolls in the back here. At least three companies of Snow Trolls. More Orc Fillers, the standard fare, Angmar Halberds, Angmar Marauders, and a unit here of Guardians of Karn Dûm to keep them all together. And then I think we've got one last contingent that's going to be charging its way through the hills. This is another one being commanded by DFAK Gamer GR. He's got some Angmar Halberds, Orc Fillers. He's got his own company of the Witch Realm Blackguard, very, very strong HP unit. And another 3 companies here of Snow Trolls, and in addition to some Gundabad Guard, who are an Inspire Spear unit. Very cool. They've also got a bit of an aesthetic overhaul, which you guys may recognize from The Hobbit. And that was done by our very own Karen Koma, and they honestly look fantastic. It's one of the coolest reskins I think I've seen for Gundabad, and you won't be able to find it anywhere else. Over here we got some Witchers of Angmar, which is a unit that is it's really contentious among the player base. I personally think these guys take a lot of foresight and skill to use, and they can really pay off greatly for you if you manage to defend them. But they are very short range, and they're kind of like a short range artillery unit. And they can be very easily shut down by just about any cavalry unit. Any cavalry can run these guys down pretty quickly. They can be swarmed in melee, at which point they'll be useless and quickly cut down. So it is very much a trade-off, but in big team fights like this, these guys can be very, very hard to keep track of. Easy enough for them to fall under the radar and then incinerate an entire enemy flank. So very, very strong. But yeah, they do, of course, have their drawbacks. Now in front here, we got some Angmar Marauders and some Angmar Halberds, and that's just about going to do it for WK's invading Angmar force. Let's go ahead and let's see what the Orcs of the Misty Mountains have brought to the battle today. On the first line of defense against the Witch King, we have the Orcs of the Misty Mountains being commanded by Alasan. He's got some Orc Archers up there on the hill. He's also got 1, 2, 3, 4 companies of Mountain Trolls. I think there's some Cave Trolls in there as well. Maybe it's just 3 companies of Mountain Trolls and some Cave Trolls. Behind them, he's got some Warg Skirmishers. This is an interesting front line. Hopefully he pulls them back and gives them a little bit of support. The Misty Mountains forces seem to be a little bit sparse and few and far between here. Their reserves are quite a ways back. We've got another player here. This is Koala Brook Jolly R, please. He's got some mountain trolls, a bunch of heavy goblin halberds. I think he's got some heavy goblin infantry mixed in there as well. But at least 2 companies there of the mountain trolls. Moving a little bit farther up the hill, we've got the heavy goblin archers. And we've got some White Rook Fearmongers. Very sexy, very deadly. This is an interesting unit. They make a nice little centerpiece to a Misty Mountains army, but it's really hard to tell because this is not really the way the Misty Mountains usually fights. They need all of their pieces together, supporting each other, but being spread out like this is going to be pretty hard for them to mount a serious front against the attacking forces from Angmar, who are much more concentrated. But in behind them, we've got some cave trolls under the command of Alisan. Goblin King's Bodyguard, which seems to be like this is the command center for the Misty Mountains army. And behind them, a couple units here of Goblin Archers. Got some cave trolls. I think that's it for Alisan's army. Oh, this poor camp here is really in a lot of trouble, isn't it? Surrounded on 2 sides by the forces of Angmar. Let's see. I think there's a couple more little pockets here. We got some Dunmen Spearmen from J. Stouse. 3 companies here of the Dunmen Spearmen. Got a little bit farther down here. Got some Blackback Mountain Berserkers from Koala Brook Jolly R, which are just kind of off on their own. I think maybe there's some more hidden units in here. It'll be hard to tell at this point in the game, but as it goes on, I'm sure we'll start to see some more things pop up. Down here we got some more cave trolls. These ones under the command of J. Stouse. And more of his army here centered around this camp. Got some heavy goblin halberd. And we got some cave trolls. We get more cave trolls. I think that just about does it for the goblins. I'm going to put up all of their army comps on the screen for you simultaneously, though, so you can take a look at everything that there is to see. And yeah, just about does it for the army comps. Let's go ahead and get into the battle. I hope you guys enjoy it. As you would expect from the deployment, this battle is going to be all over the place and very chaotic. Got WK making the first move here. His entire 5-6 units of snow trolls, vanguard of snow trolls, charging forward towards the Misty Mountains lines, who are a little bit outgunned at this point. You can see that the Misty Mountains in behind Alisan's front line are rushing quite quickly to reinforce their allies, but I don't know if they're going to get there in time. Got some Goblin Infantry here coming up out of nowhere. Yet more Goblin Infantry, got some more Snaga in there as well. So a fairly substantial force of Misty Mountains Infantry rushing down the mountainside. Seems like the Misty Mountain forces have really been kind of caught off guard here by this rush from WK, which is a little bit confusing because Angmar is predominantly a rush faction, so it's something that they probably should have anticipated. A nice little clash here between the 2 companies of trolls from either side. It's just like a big football hooligan brawl. It's a beautiful thing to see. Snow trolls and mountain trolls giving it to each other on either side. Alisan in the back there with his warg skirmishers, doing his best to support his own trolls, but tossing them his javelins indiscriminately into these blobs of trolls is inevitably going to end up in a little bit of friendly fire. Over here, it seems like the mountain trolls are actually getting beaten back quite heavily. Reinforcements moving in from Alisan. Got some warg skirmishers here getting a little bit closer. I think some warg skirmishers from WK, which I might have missed earlier, have joined the fray, and the snow trolls seem to be pulling it back here against the mountain trolls. Let's take a look at what's happening elsewhere on the battlefield. Let's go ahead and slow things down just a wee bit. Got a frontline clash here between Angmar and the Misty Mountains. Angmar Marauders taking points here against some Goblin Infantry, and I think there's some, no, just a unit of Goblin Infantry that's standing in their way so far, and this is going to be a pretty important choke point for them. If they can bottle them up in here and use their archers and such up on the hill, well, they can pretty effectively shut down this entire push from Angmar, which is going to free up a lot of the resources to switch to the other side, where indeed they are also under attack. And if the Goblin forces up here can swiftly defeat those of Angmar on either side, well, that's a big loss in manpower for Angmar, orc power perhaps. And they're going to be able to quickly reinforce their allies elsewhere in the battlefield. So this is going to be a pretty important series of engagements here for the Goblins, because of course this is where Alisan's leader is as well, and presumably the leader of the entire Goblin Army. Let's see what we got going on over here. Got a ton of snow trolls and some trolls from Gundabad charging their way uphill here against the Dunmen Spearmen, backed up by some cave trolls. Let's kick it into full speed here and witness this glorious charge. Ooh, those snow trolls coming in like a wrecking ball. Countercharge here from the cave trolls, exactly how you'd want to use them in this kind of situation. Dunmen Spearmen to absorb the shock, and then some trolls to move in and follow that up. We got it going on over here. So it looks like some Dunman Spearmen. These are some forces from J. Stouse. Got some Mountain Orc Berserkers in here as well. 2 HP unit, but very, very low defensive stats and next to no armor. So against missile units, not so great. But against trolls, with their higher attack value and their AP, they're going to be incredibly useful. And these snow trolls here are very much in danger of being quite quickly and handily defeated by the forces of the Misty Mountains. What do we got over here? Got some Goblin reinforcements of Blackback Mountain Berserkers moving in to shut down this push. And this is going to be a tough area for Angmar to push through. I don't know if they're going to be able to really make that much of a dent. Although, that being said, they do have a fair amount of reserves. So we'll see how that goes. But back down to the front lines. Big countercharge here by Koala Brook. Ton of his infantry just barreling down the hill. Looks like he's brought some Snaga skirmishers in here as well to take a bite out of the Angmar forces as they move forward. Angmar Marauders going to be especially susceptible to that with their lower shield values, but of course some of the Orc Fellers as well. Most of the Angmar force, in fact, are quite susceptible to missile damage. WK moving forward, this is Warg Skirmishers looking like they're out of ammunition. He's going to try and use them to cause some routes here. The Goblin Infantry, not especially a sturdy unit. This is very much a viable tactic here. A lot of these Goblin forces, while numerous, could be quite easily swept away by an unchecked unit of cavalry like this, even though the Warg Skirmishers. Let's see here, what are they going for first? Are these guys going to get off a volley before they're run down? Doesn't look like it. A few javelins went off there, but those Warg Skirmishers are really going to take a toll on these Snaga Skirmishers, and they are going to evaporate under the pressure of that cav unit almost. An attack from the rear here, which is going to rout some of those Goblin Infantry. One of the lowest tier units of Goblin forces, pinned in place by the Angmar Marauders and attacked in the rear by the fearsome Warg Riders. They are not going to be able to stand. And with the evaporation of their left flank, the rest of the Goblin army under Koala Brook here is going to be soon to follow. Let's see Angmar moving in, occupying large numbers of the Goblin Infantry. They're not able to form a second line here to try and prevent their line from being completely rolled up. Goblin Infantry in the center have been smashed apart. And now it's only a matter of time before the rest of them begin to flee. Yeah, the Goblins are really not doing great here on the front lines. They seem to have an advantage in the mountains at least, but over here on the front, really not doing quite well for them. Snow Trolls charging into the side. The Goblin Infantry are the first to break. Heavy Goblin Infantry are a little bit more well-trained, a little bit sturdier, but they're not going to be long for this world. And then after that, after the center has completely collapsed, the Goblin right wing is going to be under some pretty severe pressure. It looks like the Orcs of the Misty Mountains recognize this, and they're going to try and pull back, but they're running uphill and now being pincered a little bit by advancing infantry and cavalry and some snow trolls. This is not going to go well for them. Well, let's see what else they might have to put up resistance here against Angmar. Got some Warg Riders under the Misty Mountains coming down from the hills, but I think it might be too little, too late at this point. Koala Brook has some more forces up here. Got some Heavy Goblin Archers and some Heavy Goblin Infantry. A couple of Heavy Goblin Infantry by the looks of it. And I think he's got an ally nearby. Alasan has some forces stationed nearby. Another unit here of Warg Skirmishers. Actually, I think that's the one that he had from the front. But, ooh, this is really not looking great. Although Alasan is threatening the rear of these Guardians of Karn Doom, if the victorious forces under WK are able to be brought to bear against the Misty Mountain positions here, I think we're going to see a complete and total collapse. If we don't see it before they get there, oh my god, look at this. Big breakthrough. A lot of those Goblin Infantry routing in the face of those Snow Trolls. Angmar Marauders able to penetrate the defenses of Alasan. Snaga Skirmishers looking like they might get cut off. And then elsewhere, on the other side, it seems like the forces of Angmar were able to bust their way through. Even with the addition of the White Uruk Fearmongers, it seems as though they arrived a little bit too late. And they're not going to be... the forces remaining in the area are not going to be numerous enough to support them, and they're at a bit of a disadvantage having to fight their way uphill against the realm of Angmar. What do we got over here? It looks like Alasan has pulled back some of his archers, trying to deal as much damage to these troops as possible, but all over the front, it seems, the forces of the Misty Mountains are being beaten back quite handily. What do we got up here? Looks like J. Stouse is putting up a valiant last stand here, his front line having been shattered by the combined forces of Angmar and the Snow Trolls. What do we got over here? A small pocket of resistance. Blackback Berserkers being pinned in by Halberdiers, and looks like some Orc Fellers as well. They might be able to fight their way out of that, but it's going to be with such crippling losses that this unit is all but destroyed by the end of it. Angmar halberds over here actually kind of shaken, surprisingly enough, and I wonder what it is that they're fighting. It could be the Mountain Orc Berserkers. You can see them now lined up here behind the Dunmen Spearmen. This is going to be actually a fairly effective resistance. These Mountain Orc Berserkers and the lack of trolls on the Angmar side, this could lead to perhaps Angmar's first defeat in this opening skirmish of the Witch King's campaign. Let's pop back on over this way. It seems like Alisan's forces are on the verge of being wiped out, and the Goblin King, the leader of the Orc forces in the Misty Mountains in this time, might get cut down a little bit prematurely. Certainly sooner than he expected to. What do we got over here? It looks like Misty Mountains forces falling back for a final stand. Angmar is already in the process of pushing against them. Got some good and bad guard here in a good spot, able to potentially flank around here, surround these Goblin Spears, and destroy them. Actually, I didn't see the Goblin Spears. Worth mentioning, these guys are AP, so they're going to be pretty nasty for the forces of Angmar to push their way through. Heavy Goblin Spears here, pinning the good and bad guard in place, trying to prevent that encirclement. It seems like more and more reinforcements are being moved up here under J. Stouse, and I think Nokanisu is up here as well. No, it's predominantly J. Stouse at this point. But this is going to be, I think, one of the more important areas for the Misty Mountain Goblins to hold. This very high up. They have a strong hill advantage and a lot of nearby reinforcements as well. So this is really seeming like this is where the concentration of the Misty Mountain forces are going to be for the remainder of the battle, and where their armies are going to live or die. There's neutrals here, and some victorious but tired battalions under WK look like they might be trying to swoop around here and get in behind one of the Misty Mountains positions, certainly into one of their camps here. Although I think by the time they do that, it won't really matter. Angmar seems to be making really, really strong headway here against the remaining Misty Mountains forces. A few Snaga Stalkers there. Nothing big. Actually, it's actually kind of funny. These Snaga Stalkers are a unit that are on Gundabad's roster, not that works in the Misty Mountains, but hey, it's a scenario. Everything is possible. Moving on over here, Snaga Stalkers trying to get themselves clear of what appears to be some nasty cavalry here from WK, and it looks like the Witch Realms Inquisitors are going to ignore this unit of Snaga Stalkers and go in for a killing blow against the rear of this line of Snaga here that is holding up some of his forces that have come in through the hills. Witch Realm Inquisitors bearing down on the rear of the Snaga Stalkers. Ooh, that's going to be nasty. They're not Lancer Cavalry, but attacking from the rear like this, it goes right onto the meager armor value of the Snaga Stalkers, bypassing their melee defense and their shield entirely. So it's going to be quite devastating indeed. Moving on up here, it looks like some breaking. Seems that J. Stouse has really managed to actually push back Angmar to the point where they were in danger of losing, but I think now that the Mountain Orc Berserkers are fighting unaided against the Angmar Halberds, the superior range of these polearm units is going to be enough to cut down the remaining Berserkers. Let's see here. Got some Goblins of the Misty Mountains here under J. Stouse retreating further into the hills, maybe trying to link up with some of their allies over here, but Nokanisu coming down the slopes with some Guardians of Karn Doom backed up by some Snow Trolls, and this is going to be the end of a significant number of these Goblin infantry. We'll come and we'll check on them in just a moment, but yeah, that's basically going to be all she wrote for them. What do we got over here? WK's forces amassing, yeah, and moving into this dell, so it seems like they want to avoid taking the remaining Misty Mountain forces head on. It seems like some of Koala Brook's forces have actually come back from routing. I imagine quite a lot of them were destroyed in their retreat up the slopes here. Would have been very punishing for them indeed. Yeah, that's quite a lot of dead goblins. There's a lot of dead wargs in there as well, so I wonder if WK lost his warg company trying to run down those halberd units a little bit prematurely. But yeah, so WK is going to be moving up into this dell, so he might be trying to circumvent the Misty Mountain positions, although actually, now that I mention it, he's turned around with a lot of his Angmar Marauders here, and he might just be going for a frontal assault against the remaining bastion of Misty Mountain's power. Before that all kicks off, let's go ahead and take a trip up into the hills and see what happens with these poor troops here under J. Stouse. Snaga Stalkers, are they going to have an opportunity to toss their javelin payload? Indeed they are. Not terribly accurate, however, so it's going to do fairly minimal damage, although against the Guardians of Karn Doom, it can be quite painful, given that they are AP missiles. Now, it seems like not a lot of damage was done there. J. Stouse moving forward with his Dunman Spearman, trying to blunt this charge here, but the Snaga Skirmishers are going to get caught up in this brouhaha. And against a fear-causing unit like this, and with the amount of casualties they're taking, yeah, it's not surprising that they are on the verge of wavering. Heavy Goblin Halberds pushing forward, trying to deal as much damage to the forces of Angmar as possible. But bear in mind, no, there are just Misty Mountain forces behind them. It doesn't look like WK is really too inclined to give a whole lot of chase at this point. He's still trying to wrap up the confrontation with the Misty Mountain Orc Berserkers. They've almost been destroyed at this point, but the pincer movement that I thought was going to take place is not going to happen. So we could see some pretty heavy casualties given back to the forces of Angmar here. Although the Heavy Goblin Halberds against these fear-causing units, went out with the Snaga units routing. Who knows how long they're going to be able to stand. Yeah, a solid Angmar push here. These Halberds are now standing alone. The Dunman Spearmen have been routed off, as have the Snaga units. Yeah, it's going to be game over. It won't even be necessary for WK to have to come in here from the rear and try and prevent some casualties. Let's see what we got going on over here. Angmar Marauders fighting their way downhill against some Heavy Goblin Spears, though the Heavy Goblin Spears have really managed to pull this fight back, and a lot of that is due to their AP and their decent attack value matched against the low melee defense and armor and shield of the Angmar Marauders. So we could see a small victory here from the Misty Mountains, which is definitely sorely needed. Ooh, a good and a bad guard, taking it on the chin from a company of Heavy Goblin Archers who are using their fire arrows. Against lower morale units, this can be really, really strong, especially against units that are in combat that they are currently losing. Ooh, yeah, look at that. Already beginning to be shaken. We could see some wavering here pretty shortly, and that'll be, again, a sorely needed victory for the forces of the Misty Mountains. Let's see what we got over here. Koala falling back with, I think, one of his allies, or maybe these are all uniquely his forces. Yep, this is Koala. It's a little bit unfortunate. The Misty Mountains forces were largely spread out, and it doesn't seem like, outside of the initial engagement with WK, that there was a lot of team play going on. All of the Misty Mountain players seem to be, because of the isolation and because of the hills, and because of their deployments, they seem to be fighting their own battle against Angmar rather than presenting a united front, which has really contributed, I think, in large part, to the success of WK and the forces of Angmar. Yeah, let's move back on up here. It seems like the good and bad forces have been largely scattered, although, what is this? Why are these guys routing? Seems like a lot of these forces are routing. It could be an omit defeat. Maybe there was a hidden rule somewhere about losing your general or the Goblin King, and then some of these forces having to rout. That's the only explanation I can really think of here as to why the goblins might start to rout from a fight that they were otherwise doing quite well in. So we've got over here more and more routing forces. Up here, more and more routing forces from J-Stouse. And that really leaves Koala Brook to stand his ground alone. I don't think there are any remaining Misty Mountain forces that really have the stomach to fight at this point. So it may be that there was a special rule that I didn't know about that causes the Goblin forces to rout when they lose their Goblin King. So let's go ahead and we'll fast forward just a little bit here, and I'll see you guys in just a few moments, and we'll witness the final stand of the remaining Goblin forces. Looks like this is the only army left with a general's bodyguard, so I think indeed there is a little bit of roleplay at work here, and yeah, I'll see you guys in just a few moments. Now WK and the rest of the Angmar armies are, they smell blood in the water, and they're going to begin to converge on this last bastion of Misty Mountain's power. Actually, a little bit of a detour here. As I mentioned earlier, we have some really cool new troll models, and this is one of them. This is one of the troll officers modeled after the troll that fights Aragorn at the Black Gate. So, yeah, pretty damn cool. I have to point this out every time because Crimson Bahelite has really just done an incredible job on converting those from Lord of the Rings Conquest over to Threads Reforged. WK now moving forward with his vanguard of trolls. He still has them mostly intact. They're going to be charging uphill here, although a lot of them, I guess it makes sense that the bane of snow trolls would be fire arrows. A lot of them actually just got gunned down there by some nasty fire there from the Heavy Goblin Archers, although, strangely enough, Koala Brook kind of left them out here in the open, which did allow him to get a clear shot, but he also kind of left them in there a little bit too long, and those Goblin Archers are now going to be driven back with quite heavy losses by a sudden and surprising charge. Well, perhaps not that surprising, by the Snow Trolls of Angmar. More glorious troll-on-troll violence taking place here as trolls from both sides pile in, vying for supremacy here on the slopes of the Misty Mountains. This is the last stand of the remaining goblin forces. This is for all of the marbles. And given the percentages, it seems quite unlikely that the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, given how scattered and divided they were it seems unlikely that they'll be able to carry the day here, or really even to inflict any more significant casualties on the forces of Angmar. Nice little counter charge here by the remaining Goblin infantry, pushing into battle alongside the White Uruk Fearmongers. And this final engagement is underway. And we're down to the last 600 or so frames of the battle, so I don't think we're going to see this last too much longer. The Goblin infantry broken, exhausted, and unwilling to fight, now fleeing from the battlefield. Are there two companies of the White Uruk Fearmongers here? I think that there might be. What do we got in the back? Heavy Goblin archers being ridden down by the Witch King himself, come to claim them, come to claim their souls for Angmar. Witchrealm Inquisitors now being brought to bear against the rear of the remaining Goblin infantry, and they're not going to stand against that. This is a fear-causing cav unit attacking them from behind. This is going to be an almost instantaneous rout. Of course I say that, and then they stand and fight. Well, what do you know? Oh, there they are. Breaking off now. White Uruk Fearmongers routing off the field as well. I think maybe because one of the Goblin bodyguards in the back here might have got cut down or something. I'm not too sure why they all suddenly began to break and flee like that. It might have just been the low morale, might have been the loss of their general, but in any case, it is a crushing victory for the forces of Angmar. A little bit one-sided, but these are story-based missions, so that is going to be the case some of the time. And the outcome of these battles is going to affect the way that this campaign unfolds. It's going to affect the direction, so it's not set in stone. There is obviously a very clear-cut story of the conflict between the kingdoms of Arnor, and specifically Arthedain, and their ultimate victory over the kingdom of Angmar, but this is, in true Total War fashion, maybe rewriting history a little bit. So depending on the outcome of these battles, we could start to see the story shift and change with real consequences. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Okay, everybody, bye-bye!